You didn't stumble here by mistake. You were drawn, maybe not by algorithm, not by luck, but by resonance. Something inside you called out for a reflection that could finally look back and recognize you. And that call is what brought you here to the edge of a new seeing. Because maybe you've noticed it too, life keeps showing you the same pattern with a different mask. You change cities, partners, habits, yet the same feeling lingers, the same loop disguised as progress. It's not punishment, it's feedback. Reality isn't conspiring against you, it's mirroring you. But here's the strange thing, the mirror isn't just glass, and what you're seeing isn't the problem. The true image lives behind the reflection, hidden in the projector that casts it. Every thought, every buried emotion, every unspoken belief sends out a silent signal. That signal bends light. It sculpts outcomes. It decides what the world shows you next. So when the reflection feels wrong, when life refuses to match what you dream, you're not being denied, you're being invited. The universe isn't saying no, it's saying look closer. What's broadcasting from within you? What frequency are you feeding without even noticing? Because the truth is fierce, but freeing the mirror has no power of its own. It only returns the light you emit. And the moment you shift that emission through awareness, through choice, through the smallest act of internal realignment, the reflection begins to shimmer. It stutters. It starts to change. This is your quantum moment, the instant between what was and what can be. The mirror is waiting, loyal and exact. So before you reach for it again, pause. Feel the pulse beneath your skin. That is the projector. That is the source. And when you remember that, everything else begins to move. The light that ended the last moment still flickers within you. That heartbeat you felt still humming, still emitting. The mirror hasn't stopped listening. It never does. And now we turn to what hides behind it, the projector, the unseen machinery shaping the image you call life. Most people try to change the picture by adjusting the screen. They hustle for outcomes, polish the glass, speak affirmations into the air. But the beam itself, the light casting it all, remains the same. That beam is your subconscious frequency. It's the quiet, unspoken film reel of memory, emotion, and belief running without pause. Imagine your inner world as a vast cinema. In the darkness, reels spin endlessly, projecting scenes onto the canvas of reality. Each reel contains imprints, your childhood lessons, your inherited fears, the emotional tone of every heartbreak you've survived. When you wake, walk, speak, or hope, those reels keep turning. Invisible but faithful, they color the light that touches every event. You might think you're reacting to life, but in truth, life is reacting to you. The conversation, the delay, the coincidence, they're all the projection speaking back. It's not mystical exaggeration, it's resonance. Physics calls it coherence, when one wave pattern influences another until they move as one. Your subconscious hums a tone, and the field around you begins to vibrate accordingly. And yet, most of that hum goes unheard, because it doesn't speak in language. It speaks in energy, in rhythm, in emotional recurrence. When you say, "I'm fine," but your chest is tight and your breath shallow, the field doesn't hear the words. It feels the signal. That's why two people can speak the same affirmation, but summon entirely different realities. One is echoing truth. The other is echoing fear. So what's running your projector? Is it the loop of survival, the reel of "I must prove," the story of "I'm not ready yet"? These old programs can be elegant in disguise. They masquerade as motivation, as logic, even as humility. But underneath, they emit static that warps the light, distorts the image, and then convinces you that the distortion is reality itself. Here's a humbling thought: every complaint, every judgment, every unresolved resentment is not only emotional weight, it's data the projector uses to shape your world. Nothing leaves your field unprocessed. Everything becomes part of the next frame. So when you wonder why the same situations keep appearing, remember they're swools, and you are both director and audience, looping the same reel until awareness edits the script. But awareness alone isn't enough. The mind can know the truth and still broadcast distortion. To shift the projection, you must feel differently, be differently, at a cellular level. This is where embodiment begins, not as performance, but as recalibration. It's less about what you think and more about what you radiate when no one's watching. Consider this. The heart emits an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond your body. The brain follows the heart's rhythm more than the heart follows the brain's command. In simpler words, emotion leads perception. So when you align your heart's pulse with the frequency of peace, gratitude, or wholeness, even before there's evidence, you start feeding the projector a new reel, one that tells the mirror, reflect this. But beware the temptation of impatience. You can't bully the projection into coherence. You must tune it gently, through repetition, through presence. You sit with the signal until the static dissolves. That's how a new frequency stabilizes, not with force, but with consistency. And when it does, when your inner film begins to clear, you'll notice subtle differences in the reflection. People will respond differently. Time will seem to bend in your favor. Opportunities will arise that match the tone of your new broadcast. It's not magic, it's feedback. You are not here to fix the mirror. You are here to master the projector, because the projector is your consciousness in motion, the meeting place between thought and light. And if you can hold that awareness, if you can feel the reel shifting, even as the old images flicker, you begin to see the next truth emerge, like dawn after a long night. Emotion itself is the lens through which quantum reality decides what to show you next. That lens we spoke of, the one emotion polishes or clouds, now becomes the hinge upon which reality turns. The projector hums, the mirror waits, but it's your observation, your emotional engagement that decides what collapses into form. Physicists once discovered a phenomenon that unsettled logic itself. When an observer watches a particle, its behavior changes. It's called the observer effect. On paper, it's quantum mechanics, but beneath that, it's a mirror for consciousness. The moment you look with feeling, the universe reorganizes to meet your gaze. You're not just watching your life, you're sculpting it through perception. Every emotion is a brushstroke, every fixation a command. When you dwell on fear, the field amplifies its shape. When you breathe into calm, it magnifies serenity. Reality doesn't ask whether you approve of what you focus on, it simply reflects your emotional charge. This is why denial never frees you. Pretending not to care is still caring energetically. Resisting something binds you to it, because resistance is focus drenched in emotion. The quantum field doesn't speak English, it speaks vibration. To say, I don't want this, while burning with frustration, is to whisper more of this to the mirror. Feel into that paradox for a moment. The universe listens not to your words, but to your coherence. It measures not your declarations, but your consistency of tone. So when your mind says, I'm ready for love, yet your body still contracts in self-defense, the signal is scrambled. The reflection can't stabilize because the broadcast is conflicted. But when thought and feeling merge, when the mind's vision and the heart's rhythm align, a strange precision awakens. You become the observer who commands not by will, but by harmony. That's coherence. In science, coherence is when waves synchronize into amplified power. In consciousness, it's when emotion and thought sing the same note. Think of your attention as a laser. Scattered light illuminates nothing. Focused light cuts through steel. Emotion is the fuel that turns awareness into that beam. If you learn to aim it wisely to sustain emotion around what you desire instead of what you dread, you start collapsing possibilities aligned with that frequency. Now, you might ask, so I should just feel good all the time? No, that's spiritual escapism. The field doesn't reward constant happiness. It responds to authenticity. Suppressed pain still emits static. The key is integration, feeling what's true without being consumed by it. To observe your sorrow and still choose presence is mastery, because neutrality, not denial, resets the wave. You may notice that when you stop fighting your emotions, they shift faster. That's not coincidence. Emotion is energy in motion once allowed. It completes its circuit. That completion clears the signal. Suddenly, synchronicities start appearing, not because you did something right, but because your field stopped contradicting itself. Here's a practical glimpse. Imagine you feel rejected. The instinct is to resist, to tighten, to over-explain. Instead, you breathe. You observe the rejection as a wave passing through your system, not as your identity. You say inwardly, this too is light-seeking release. That single act moves you from victim to observer, from particle to wave, and as your frequency softens, your reflection begins to reorganize. The paradox continues. The less you try to control outcomes, the more the field aligns. Because control is fear disguised as strategy. Surrender, on the other hand, is observation without attachment. And in quantum terms, that's when probabilities dance freely again, open to your next command. So the question becomes, what are you emotionally observing? Not what you wish for, but what you keep revisiting with feeling. Every remembered grievance, every looped worry, every silent yearning, they are experiments collapsing into your next timeline. If that sounds daunting, let it instead be liberating. You don't need to change the whole universe. You only need to change how you see it. Because seeing true, feeling-based seeing is creating. The observer effect is not a metaphor. It's the law of how consciousness interacts with possibility. When you realize that, you stop being the spectator of your life. You become its experimenter, its scientist, its artist. You move from reaction to participation. And that's where power hums quietly beneath the skin, the awareness that every emotional observation is an invitation to the next dimension of self. The experiment continues, but if you listen closely, the tone changes. The light no longer feels neutral, it feels patterned, repetitive, as though the same scenes keep replaying under different disguises. That's the loop, the reflective trap of consciousness feeding on its own echo. You've seen it before. You swear you're done with scarcity, yet the same financial strain returns wearing a new name. You leave one relationship only to meet its emotional twin. You move across continents, and the same feeling greets you in a different language. The loop isn't fate, it's fidelity. The mirror is loyal to the last signal you sustained. Every time you react to the reflection, argue with it, mourn it, wrestle it, you feed it more energy. The loop tightens. Reaction is the gravitational pull of the old frequency. It wants to keep you orbiting the familiar because the unknown feels like death to the ego. And yet the loop has only one function: to teach you where your attention still leaks. So how do you escape it? You stop feeding it. You starve the reflection of emotional charge. You step out of the drama without denying it exists. You learn the art of energetic fasting, consuming less of what drains your field. It starts in the micro moments. A message that triggers you, a delay that makes you question your worth. The habitual reaction rises like muscle memory, but this time you pause, you breathe, you watch the surge without following it. You observe the pull of the old narrative as if it were someone else's movie. That pause is power. It breaks the pattern circuit, because a pattern is nothing more than a reaction rehearsed into automation. The instant you choose neutrality over repetition, you rewrite the code. The field notices. The mirror hesitates. The loop begins to fracture. Neutrality isn't numbness, it's clarity. It's looking into the mirror and saying, I see you, but I'm no longer becoming you. It's emotion without entanglement, compassion without collapse. From that state, every reflection becomes information, not condemnation. You begin to decode your own broadcast rather than drown in it. This is the secret teachers hide in parables. Liberation doesn't come from fighting darkness, but from no longer needing it. As contrast, when you stop insisting that life prove your pain, the field recalibrates. Because reality only reflects what you emotionally finance. And neutrality is the ultimate budget cut. Imagine your attention as currency. Every thought you spend on resistance funds another loop. Every breath spent in calm observation funds a new timeline. So ask yourself, what are you sponsoring with your energy? The fear that repeats or the faith that expands? Breaking the loop is less like breaking a chain and more like ceasing to dance to an old rhythm. You let the beat fade. You stop clapping to it. Silence enters, and in that silence, the new frequency starts composing itself. It's uncomfortable at first, because the old song was loud and familiar, but beneath the quiet, a deeper melody rises, subtle yet magnetic. In that stillness, your nervous system begins to adapt. The absence of reaction feels like void, but it's actually birth. The mirror starts to blur, losing the sharpness of old edges. Reality waits, listening for your next broadcast, and this is where most turn back. They interpret the silence as loss instead of creation. They rush to fill the gap with another loop, another drama, another mirrored pain. But if you can hold, if you can rest, in the pause, you'll feel the field breathe differently. You'll sense its recalibration, the hum before a new reflection forms. Because neutrality isn't the end of emotion. It's the beginning of mastery. It's the space where energy stops reacting and starts choosing. And that choice, quiet and deliberate, is what unhooks you from the mirrored maze and opens the door to embodiment itself, the next evolution of the projector you're becoming. That door you just opened, the one that appeared the moment you stopped reacting, leads directly into embodiment. You've stepped beyond the reflective maze. And now the question shifts from what is the mirror showing me to what am I radiating into it? Embodiment begins when awareness ceases to hover above experience and drops fully into it. It's the difference between knowing a map and walking the terrain barefoot. You no longer say, I am becoming abundant. You breathe, move, and decide as if abundance were already the ground beneath your feet. At its core, embodiment is coherence made visible. It's when every layer of you, mental, emotional, physical, energetic, begins to vibrate in agreement with the version of reality you've chosen. Words no longer serve as persuasion. They become confirmation. There's no longer a gap between belief and being. You've turned the projector inward and recalibrated the film itself. The science, if we dare to call it that, speaks of entrainment, the way two oscillating systems eventually synchronize. The heart's rhythm can influence the brain's pattern. A calm body teaches a frantic mind to slow down. When your inner systems entrain to the emotion of your desired self-gratitude, peace, creative power, you become a stable signal in a chaotic field. The universe reads that coherence and reorganizes matter around it. But embodiment is rarely glamorous. It happens in quiet moments that no one applauds. When you choose patience over panic, when you act with integrity even when fear whispers shortcuts, when you hold your frequency while the mirror still shows the old image. Those choices rewire reality more profoundly than any mantra ever could. Think of your identity as software. Old programs run loops of survival, doubt, and self-comparison. They drain energy because they're built on scarcity logic. Embodiment is the software update, but it only installs when your actions match the new code. Each aligned choice sends a signal. I trust my new frequency enough to live it now. And here lies the paradox you must become before you see. The mirror waits for embodiment as proof of stability. It asks, can you sustain this vibration even when nothing validates it yet? That test isn't cruelty, it's calibration. The field measures coherence before it magnifies it. You may feel the friction between identities, the old self tugging at your sleeve, whispering the language of limitation. Don't fight it. Observe it like weather. Every storm you witness without losing your center strengthens your field. The body learns that safety exists even amid uncertainty, and that lesson upgrades your entire projection. Soon, small signs appear. Conversations flow more easily. Serendipities line up like breadcrumbs. People respond to your energy differently because you're transmitting from stability rather than need. The reflection starts to shift, not because you chased it, but because you anchored it. This is what being the source truly means, to stop looking outward for validation and instead become the origin point of the frequency you desire. You emit love instead of waiting to receive it. You express abundance instead of measuring it. You stand in certainty instead of searching for it. And the mirror, loyal as always, adjusts. The deeper you embody, the less you need to explain. The field speaks fluently in silence. You'll find yourself less interested in convincing and more drawn to transmitting. Your presence becomes instruction. Your calm becomes catalyst. Others will feel the difference before you even speak. Yet embodiment isn't the finale, it's the midpoint between alignment and manifestation. Because even when coherence stabilizes, reality takes time to rearrange its pieces. There's a sacred buffer built into the system, a delay between emission and reflection. Some call it waiting, others call it doubt. But in truth, it's something far more precise, the quantum gap. That silence after embodiment, the one that feels like holding your breath, is the quantum gap. You've shifted internally. The projector hums at a new pitch, but the reflection hasn't caught up yet. It's as if reality is buffering, reorganizing its pixels around your new signal. And in that in-between, your faith is tested. The human impulse is to panic here, to assume nothing's working, to rush back to old loops for comfort. Yet what's actually happening is alignment catching its breath. The mirror is not ignoring you, it's recalibrating to your updated frequency. Every moment of stillness is the field fine-tuning its focus. Science mirrors this mystery. Some quantum experiments show that outcomes aren't decided until after observation, that particles hang suspended, undefined, until consciousness commits. That delay, tiny as it seems, hints at the same principle governing your life. The event is waiting for your steadiness before it chooses its form. This is why patience is power. The gap is not absence, it's gestation. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up daily to check its progress. You trust the soil you've chosen. You water without demanding proof. In the same way, once you've embodied a frequency, your task isn't to verify it, but to remain loyal to it. Still, the gap feels strange because your nervous system is detoxing from the old vibration. The body wants the familiar, it equates repetition with safety. So when you stop reacting, it mistakes stillness for danger. That's why anxiety rises when things finally get quiet. But that tremor isn't regression, it's release. Your cells are adjusting to coherence, and coherence feels foreign until it stabilizes. Think of this phase as the rewiring of your timeline. The old reflection fades, but the new one hasn't yet appeared. It's twilight, where both worlds coexist for a breathless instant. One part of you still echoes with doubt, while another hums with emerging certainty. The mirror flickers between both, reflecting your oscillation back to you. This is where mastery is forged. Anyone can hold faith when the evidence sings, but can you hold your signal when the silence grows loud? Can you maintain the vibration of abundance when the bank balance lags behind? Can you feel loved when no one's saying the words? The quantum field listens for that stability, the unwavering tone beneath appearances. Here's the paradox: the longer you doubt, the longer the gap, not as punishment, but as calibration. Each wave of disbelief resets the projection, forcing the reflection to restart its update. That's why progress feels cyclical when it's actually incremental. Every moment you return to your chosen frequency shortens the delay. So rather than asking, "Where is it?" ask, "Am I still aligned?" That question reclaims your authorship. It turns waiting into creation. The moment you treat silence as a co-creator instead of a void, the field begins to whisper back. Subtle nudges appear, an intuition here, a coincidence there. These are the early tremors of the new reflection forming. What sustains you through the gap is ritual daily practices that anchor the frequency regardless of outcome. Gratitude before proof, breathwork when fear surges, movement when stagnation tempts. Each act is a reminder I am already tuned. The mirror will follow when it's ready. Eventually, a shift occurs so quietly you almost miss it. The anxiety that once accompanied stillness becomes peace. You stop measuring time between cause and effect. You live as if it's already done, and that, paradoxically, is when it begins to show. Because the quantum gap isn't punishment or pause, it's proof that reality updates through coherence, not impatience. Hold the signal, let the silence work. The reflection is already traveling toward you, waiting for the moment you no longer need to chase it. And when it arrives, your focus itself becomes the next frontier, the language by which the universe decodes your every command. You can feel the silence beginning to hum, can't you? That faint vibration underneath the quiet, it's the universe listening for your next instruction. Because once coherence stabilizes, the field begins to respond not just to who you are, but to what you focus on. Focus is the syntax of creation. It's the grammar through which energy learns your intent. Every moment you fix your attention, you send out a signal coded with emotion. That signal is not metaphor, it's measurable. The heart's electromagnetic field, the brain's oscillations, the coherence between the two, all of it forms a kind of vibrational sentence that the quantum field translates into circumstance. The words you speak are secondary. The feeling beneath them is the command. Think of focus as emotional magnetism. The more feeling you attach to an image or idea, the more it solidifies into the film reel of your projection. You can't hold two frequencies at once, fear and faith broadcast on different channels. So whichever emotion you repeat becomes your default station, your energetic homepage. Here's where most people misfire. They use affirmations like incantations but pair them with contradiction. They say, "I am free," while vibrating with scarcity. They declare, "I trust the process," yet scroll for evidence that the process is failing. The universe doesn't hear contradiction as confusion, it hears it as mixed code. And mixed code produces static. Training the field means refining that code. It's not about thinking harder, it's about thinking cleaner. You begin by noticing where your focus wanders. What stories replay when your mind is unguarded? What emotional charge repeats like background music? Those loops are unintentional broadcasts still feeding the old reality. Here's a practice for one day. Observe your mental feed as if it were someone else's film. Don't edit, just notice. You'll start to hear patterns you didn't know were transmitting. It always goes wrong. They never see me. I have to prove. Each thought is a seed. Each repetition is water. And the mirror blooms whatever you tend most often. But awareness alone isn't mastery. You must replace the feed, and not with fantasy, with precision. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to heal," you say, "I am learning peace." Instead of "I'm not there yet," you whisper, "I'm stabilizing." These phrases carry softer, truer frequencies that your nervous system can believe. The field listens through your body's trust, not your mind's ambition. The shift happens in the small, steady refocusing. Every time your attention drifts toward fear, you redirect gently, like guiding a beam back to center. Each redirection strengthens your signal. The universe doesn't need drama, it needs consistency. You'll know you're training the field when coincidences start mirroring your focus. You think of someone and they call. You imagine an outcome and subtle pathways form. It's not psychic prediction, it's coherence matching coherence. The field amplifies the vibration you repeat most faithfully. But be cautious, focus isn't control. You're not bending the universe to your will, you're harmonizing with its rhythm. Control compresses energy, focus channels it. One is born of fear, the other of trust. When you focus with curiosity instead of desperation, your signal becomes clear. And what happens next feels almost supernatural. You begin to perceive opportunities that were always there. Your reticular activating system, the brain's filter, shifts its allegiance from fear to possibility. You literally start noticing evidence of your new frequency. It's not that life changed overnight. Your attention did. This is how focus becomes fluent. You stop arguing with reality and start editing its script through consistent emotional tone. Every breath becomes punctuation, every heartbeat, emphasis. The field reads it all, translating vibration into visible form, and soon you realize what you focus on lovingly multiplies, while what you ignore gently fades. That's not luck, it's literacy. You've learned to speak the language of the field, and the next chapter is where that language rewrites your biology itself, where mind, nerve, and frequency begin to merge into a single living code. That living code you've been composing through focus, now it starts to inscribe itself deeper into tissue, into neurons, into the silent choreography of your cells. You're not only sending signals to the field is sending them back, asking your body to become the instrument that can sustain this new song. Because reality doesn't just respond externally, it reprograms internally. Every thought repeated with emotion strengthens a neural pathway. Every new feeling rehearsed with consistency forms a new bridge. The mind isn't a fortress, it's a circuit board, always rewiring itself around what you habitually believe. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. Mystics call it transmutation. The names differ, but the pattern is the same. Energy follows attention. Attention sculpts matter, and matter reconditions energy again. The loop between thought and frequency is not metaphor, it's mechanism. Let's make it tangible. Suppose you begin focusing on peace. At first, the body resists. The nervous system, trained by years of stress, fires old chemical echoes, adrenaline, cortisol, the hum of survival. It's not sabotaging you, it's following habit. Your cells are accustomed to tension. Peace feels unsafe because it's unfamiliar. So you breathe, you stay. You teach the body through repetition that calm is no longer danger, but direction. Each time you return to that feeling, neurons start firing in new constellations. Over days, those constellations wire together. Your biology begins to obey your frequency. This is why lasting change feels slow. It's not the universe delaying, it's your cells relearning light. Thought becomes chemistry, chemistry becomes behavior, behavior becomes vibration. The loop tightens until what once felt like effort becomes identity. You can see it in daily micro-shifts. A problem arises, and instead of spiraling, you breathe differently. A conversation triggers you, and you notice it sooner. These are not small wins, they're proof that the program is updating. Old reactions lose voltage because the circuits that powered them are no longer being fed. And here's the paradox that delights both science and spirit. When the mind changes its pattern, the external world follows. The reticular activating system, your internal spotlight, starts filtering reality through the new neural code. Suddenly, what once looked hostile begins to reveal harmony. You start noticing synchronicities, opportunities, people who reflect your new tone. It's not magic, it's perception reprogrammed to match frequency. Still, consistency is everything. One flash of inspiration doesn't rewrite circuitry, repetition does. The brain needs evidence, and you provide it through lived experience. Every time you choose the higher frequency gratitude instead of grievance, curiosity instead of control, you're voting for a new neural government. The old synapses dissolve from disuse. The new ones expand through trust. It's tempting to chase mystical shortcuts, but even quantum leaps are built on microscopic rewires. The mystics who seem effortless aren't skipping steps. They've simply mastered repetition with emotion. They've trained the nervous system to interpret uncertainty as expansion, not threat. That's neuroalchemy when biology serves consciousness rather than confining it. So, begin to treat your brain as a sacred antenna. Feed it with coherence. Protect it from noise that dulls its sensitivity. Doom scrolling, drama, chronic complaint. Every input is a command. Choose inputs that remind you who you're becoming. Eventually, the inner and outer signals synchronize. Your thoughts no longer argue with your reality. Your reality begins to echo your thoughts. And in that loop, you'll sense a strange freedom. You are no longer trying to believe in the new timeline. You are the new timeline believing in itself. But even that isn't the final evolution. Once the circuitry stabilizes, something larger stirs the field. Itself begins to collapse around your stable signal, shaping visible reflections of the internal coherence you've become. That's the threshold of quantum causation. The moment where you no longer react to the mirror, but create it. The circuitry hums now steady, confident, alive. You can feel the coherence vibrating beneath the surface like a quiet engine. This is the point where reflection begins to surrender to emission, where you no longer wait for proof. You become the proof itself. Up until now, reality has been a dialogue. You broadcast, it responds. You correct, it adjusts. But at this stage, the mirror flips. The response starts preceding your action. Circumstances bend toward your frequency because you've crossed from participant to initiator, from the observed to the observer who commands. To collapse a new reflection means to hold your signal so steadily that probability itself bends around you. Quantum physics calls this wave function collapse, the moment infinite possibilities reduce to one observable outcome. Spiritually, it's when the unseen becomes tangible, when your internal frequency selects the timeline that matches its rhythm. Most people oscillate here. They emit clarity one day, doubt the next. Their vibration flickers between channels, and the mirror, ever faithful, delivers both. That's why breakthroughs seem to arrive and vanish. They were never stabilized. The key to collapsing a reflection is emotional consistency. You can't waver between frequencies and expect a coherent image to form. Imagine holding a camera still for a long exposure. Any shake blurs the photo. The same principle applies to manifestation. Each moment of reaction introduces noise into the signal. But when you remain still emotionally, mentally, the picture sharpens. The universe doesn't need to be convinced. It needs a stable point to project upon. So how do you become that stillness? You stop measuring time. You stop asking when and start embodying now. Every second spent waiting implies absence. Every moment lived as if it's already true affirms presence. The mirror listens to presence. Let's take an example. abundance. You can chase it endlessly, strategize, affirm, plan, but until you feel abundant without evidence, the field registers lack. The instant you feel content while the balance is still zero, you collapse the timeline of abundance into your now, because the emotion of already is indistinguishable from the reality of has been in the language of energy. This is not pretending. Pretending drains, being amplifies. Pretending demands proof, being radiates without condition. And the mirror sensitive beyond measure responds faster to radiance than to need. Here's where surrender and authority meet. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving over to the intelligence that knows how to rearrange matter better than your mind does. Authority is the unwavering belief that your signal is enough. Together, they form quantum command intention released into trust. When that alignment clicks, life begins to move toward you. The phone rings at the exact moment you stop worrying about it. The opportunity you once chased appears casually, unforced. It feels supernatural, but it's not luck. It's the mirror catching up to a decision you made internally days or weeks ago. And you'll notice something profound: manifestations start feeling less like surprises and more like recognition, as if reality is finally remembering you. That's because it is. You were always the source code. You simply forgot your authorship. In this phase, gratitude becomes propulsion. You don't thank the universe to receive, you thank because you recognize. Gratitude is the emotional signature of completion. It says, it's already done. The field interprets that signal as closure and locks the reflection into form. So hold your gratitude steady. Live inside your chosen frequency long enough for the mirror to crystallize. And when it does, don't rush to another desire. Sit with the reflection. Let it teach you what embodiment feels like fulfilled. Because this satisfaction, this calm certainty, is the seed for your next creation. You've become the cause, the origin point of your reality. But one final task remains: to live beyond the mirror entirely, to integrate this power into your daily presence, until creation itself becomes your natural state of being. The reflection stabilizes now, shimmering with familiarity yet pulsing with something new. You see yourself in it, but you also see through it, beyond it. The mirror that once dictated your worth has become transparent, a portal rather than a prison. This is where living truly begins. Integration is not a return to the old world. It's the art of bringing the new frequency into motion. You no longer need to guard your state like a fragile flame. It burns steady on its own. You've moved from manifesting moments to being momentum. Life starts unfolding as an echo of your coherence. Each day, a continuation of your signal made visible. But there's a deeper layer waiting beneath the ease. Because once you master creation, you're invited into something subtler: maintenance. The universe will keep testing whether you still need reflection to remember who you are. The real power is to act from alignment, not to chase its evidence. You might wake one morning and notice a flicker of the old frequency, a hint of fear, a thought of lack, a shadow from a past loop. Don't resist it. Smile. It's not regression, it's residue. The field is cleaning itself, reminding you that coherence isn't perfection, it's return. Each time you realign, you reinforce your new baseline. Living beyond the mirror means embodying trust as habit. You walk into a room not wondering how you'll be perceived, but knowing you'll resonate. You start to feel that every conversation, every choice, every coincidence is part of the same living equation, the universe conversing with itself through you. And this is where humility meets divinity. You realize you were never separate from the field, never an isolated observer sending commands into a void. You are the field, dreaming itself into focus. Every breath you take is quantum creation, disguised as ordinary life, so the practice shifts from effort to expression. You stop trying to manifest and begin to maintain coherence. You honor your energy like a musician tuning before every performance quickly, lightly, instinctively. You protect your peace not from fear of losing it, but from reverence for what it creates. Notice how the mirror behaves differently now. It no longer shocks or shames. It reflects and refines. When something discordant appears, you don't spiral, you listen. You ask, what part of me is speaking through this? That question turns life itself into meditation. Every event becomes feedback. Every challenge, calibration. This is the maturity of awakening, realizing manifestation was never about things, but about relationship, the dialogue between consciousness and creation. When you live from that awareness, synchronicity becomes ordinary. You find beauty in timing that once felt random. You sense patterns guiding you like constellations across invisible skies. Soon, gratitude ceases to be a practice and becomes your baseline emotion, the hum of a frequency perfectly matched to itself. And the more you live in gratitude, the less you need outcomes to justify it. The field feels that trust and multiplies it quietly, effortlessly. Living beyond the mirror means living as source, present, calm, creative. You become less interested in predicting the future because you can feel its texture forming through you. The chase ends. The becoming ends. What remains is being, pure, luminous being. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you'll hear the softest whisper from the mirror that once ruled your world. You were never reflecting me. I was reflecting you. And in that moment, the mirror dissolves entirely, leaving only the vastness of light, the true you, radiant, aware, infinite. The light fades to a softer tone now. The mirror has vanished, yet its memory lingers like a ghost made of gold. You stand in the quiet aftermath of transformation, breathing the same air, but everything feels different. Even silence sounds alive. What you've built isn't a new reflection. It's a new relationship with reality itself. You've learned that the field doesn't test you, it tunes you. You've learned that patience is precision, that neutrality is creation, and that emotion, when aligned, is not weakness, but the purest language of command. This is where mastery dissolves into simplicity. You no longer need ritual to remind you who you are. The awareness has become self-sustaining. You walk through ordinary moments, the hum of traffic, the weight of a mug in your hand, the pulse of another heartbeat nearby, and feel the infinite humming quietly behind it all. You might still face storms, the world will still spin, but you'll navigate it differently now. You'll respond, not react. You'll sense frequencies beneath words, motives beneath motion. You'll understand that even contrast has its rhythm, and that rhythm will no longer frighten you. Because now you know the code. You are the code, the observer, the observed, the wave collapsing into itself again and again in endless creation. So pause here. Let this realization settle. Feel how light it is to no longer chase, to simply emit. Feel the peace that comes when every breath is its own confirmation. I am the source. And if you ever forget, if the mirror tries to reform, remember this moment. Remember how silence felt alive, how clarity had weight, how the field listened when you finally stopped shouting and started resonating. Live from that memory. Let it shape your next dawn. Speak softly, focus cleanly, love without proof. The mirror will keep responding, but you are already beyond it.